I'm Grace Whitmore, 40 years old. A dreamer, at least, that's what I always called myself. In my family, dreamer was just another word for failure. For years, I believed silence would keep the peace. I was wrong. At home, my mother Margaret reigned like a queen. My sister Olivia mirrored her cruelty, feeding off every insult. My father Robert buried himself in silence, and my brother Ethan shrank from every conflict. Around their table, love was conditional. Daniel's hand in mine was the only kindness I could still count on. The breaking point came at Bella Mars, my favorite restaurant. It should have been a place of warmth. Instead, it became the stage of my humiliation. Margaret raised her voice so the chandeliers seemed to echo her contempt. "Grace, you'll never be successful. Stop dreaming." Olivia laughed, calling me a shadow. Even strangers glanced over as if they could feel the sting of my family's scorn. Ever been told you'll never be enough? Hit like if someone has ever mocked your worth. Comment if you've ever had to fight just to keep believing in yourself. For me, it began there at Bella Mars. My mother's voice cut sharper than any knife on the table, and the words still echo. "Grace, you'll never be successful. Stop dreaming." The words seemed to cut sharper than any knife on the table. Around me, the hum of Bella Mars carried on. Waiters weaving between tables, glasses clinking, laughter bursting from strangers who had no idea how heavy the air felt where I sat. Bella Mars had always been my favorite spot, with its velvet booths and chandeliers dripping warm light, but today it was something else entirely. An arena, one where every smile from the polished staff, every polished fork, seemed to reflect my mother's contempt back at me. I tried to straighten my shoulders, tried to act as if her words had simply bounced off, but they sank deep. The family gatherings were always supposed to look idyllic to outsiders, a respectable family having Sunday lunch, but beneath the surface, they were never that. Today was proof. "Mom's just being honest," Olivia chimed in, swirling her wine as though she were the queen presiding over a comedy. Her smile was the kind that wanted others to laugh along. "Grace still hasn't figured out that reality pays bills, not dreams." She tossed her hair, proud, feeding the performance. I glanced at Ethan, hoping for the faintest defense. He dropped his eyes to his plate, shoulders rounding, as if retreating into himself. Robert, my father, wasn't even pretending to engage. His focus was on his steak, each cut meticulous, as though silence could save him from being pulled into the spectacle. Margaret leaned closer across the table, her perfume wafting toward me, suffocating. "At your age, I was already raising 3 children and managing a household. You, still wasting time chasing ideas." She let the word drip like poison. I felt Daniel's hand slide across under the tablecloth, finding mine. His fingers tightened, a quiet message. "Endure it." The squeeze was small, invisible to everyone else, but in that instant it was the only thing tethering me to sanity. My heart thudded in response, not from love alone, but from the raw ache of being exposed. The waiters moved with careful grace around us, balancing trays, as though unaware of the storm brewing at our table. Yet I saw a few glances, a young server pausing, catching the sharp edge of my mother's tone, then quickly looking away. Humiliation has a way of filling a room until even strangers sense it. "Grace still talks about writing her novel," Olivia continued, voice sweet but blades underneath. "Do you remember, Mom? It's been years, maybe decades now?" She laughed, and one of my aunts, seated at the far end, gave a nervous chuckle, unsure which side she was supposed to fall on. I swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in my throat. My fork hovered above the pasta I hadn't touched. Every nerve in me screamed to run, to escape Bella Mars, but leaving would mean surrender, and I couldn't give them that. Margaret leaned back, satisfied with the attention she commanded. Then, as if saving the most lethal jab for dessert, she said it with a cold finality. "At 40, you'll still be talking about dreams that never came true." The table fell into a hush. Even Olivia paused mid-sip. The chandelier's glow seemed to dim. The scrape of a knife from another table felt miles away. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I had more than dreams, that I had Daniel, that I still had hope, but the words stuck like stones in my throat. Daniel shifted beside me. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on Margaret as though memorizing her cruelty. He didn't speak, not yet, but I felt his hand press harder against mine, grounding me. It was the only defiance that could exist in this public theater without sparking further humiliation. We finished the meal, or rather, they finished it. Plates cleared, coffees ordered, laughter resumed, but I sat in silence. Every bite I tried turned to ash in my mouth. I was present in body, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying her words over and over. When we finally rose to leave, the afternoon sun hit us at the entrance, warm and blinding. Margaret adjusted her jacket, Olivia checked her phone, Ethan trudged forward silently, and Robert headed to the car without so much as a glance at me. I lingered a moment on the sidewalk outside Bella Mars, the laughter from inside spilling out, mocking me as much as my family had. My heart pounded, rage and shame mingling until I could hardly tell the difference. That was when Daniel leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper, steady and dangerous, meant only for me. "I'll do something about this. You'll see." The apartment was dark, except for the kitchen light. I sat with a glass of water, replaying my mother's words like knives. The silence of the room only sharpened them, every echo of her voice cutting again, as if the walls themselves remembered. The hum of the refrigerator was the only other sound, a low and steady reminder of time passing, of minutes spent circling the same shameful phrases. Daniel had offered to make tea when we came home, but I'd waved him off. Now, hours later, I traced the rim of the glass with my finger, staring at the reflection of the light above, wondering if the ache in my chest would ever ease. It wasn't just tonight. It was years of being chipped away piece by piece until there was nothing left but the hollow of what I once thought I could be. I closed my eyes, and the memories came rushing. Margaret dismissing my college applications as a phase, Olivia mocking my ideas in front of friends, Robert quietly paying bills as if that silence were permission to never support me. Even Ethan, timid as he was, always stayed neutral. I had been alone in my family long before tonight's lunch. Bella Mars was only the latest battlefield. I didn't hear Daniel walk in until he placed a hand on my shoulder. His warmth startled me. "Grace," he said softly, "don't let her words sit in you like that." I shook my head, staring at the water. "It's not just tonight, it's every time." "She's right, Daniel. I don't have anything to show for myself. I wasted so much time believing that I could be something more." He pulled out the chair across from me, leaning in so his eyes caught mine. "You are more. You're stronger than she'll ever admit. She sees it, that's why she tries so hard to break you." I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was louder. My throat burned as I whispered, "Do you know what I once dreamed of? Before all of this?" His brow furrowed. "Tell me." I laughed bitterly, staring down at my hands. "Culinary design? Not just cooking I wanted to create. To design spaces where food isn't just eaten, it's experienced. Where atmosphere, taste, and memory blend into something unforgettable." My chest tightened with the confession, because saying it aloud felt like opening an old wound. But it was ridiculous, wasn't it? Who makes a life out of dreams like that? Daniel leaned back, considering me with a seriousness that made me squirm. "You buried that dream because she mocked you. You stopped believing because she wanted you small. But you're not small, Grace." Tears stung at the corners of my eyes, and I blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. "It's too late now. I'm not 20 anymore. I'm almost— Don't." His voice cut firm, slicing through my spiraling thoughts. "Don't measure yourself by her timeline." He leaned forward, voice low and deliberate, as if anchoring the words into me. "If the stage came back to you, would you take it?" The question lodged in my chest. My mouth opened, then closed. I wanted to say yes, to scream it, but fear strangled me. The weight of years of doubt pressed too heavy. I gripped the glass tighter, staring at the water, trembling with the tremor of my hand. Before I could answer, the silence of the apartment was broken by a sharp vibration on the counter. My phone lit up, the family group chat flashing across the screen. A single message glowed, casual but suffocating. "Next Sunday, Bella Mars again." Every ping on my phone feels like a dagger. Bella Mars is perfect, especially for those who can't afford anywhere else. The screen glowed on the table beside me, each new notification lighting the kitchen like a cruel rhythm. Morning light filtered through the blinds, cutting sharp stripes across the walls, but nothing felt warm. I pulled my sweater tighter and stared at the phone, my pulse racing with every chime. Margaret's words bled into my skin the same way they had yesterday at the restaurant, only now they carried the permanence of text, where each line could be reread, dissected, and carved deeper. Olivia chimed in immediately, as if she had been waiting. A sticker of a cartoon character rolling its eyes popped up, followed by, "True, Mom. Some people should just learn their place." The sticker blinked back at me like a taunt. I could almost hear her laugh as she pressed send, savoring the cruelty. I typed out a reply, then erased it. My thumbs hovered over the screen, trembling. What was the point? Every word I offered became kindling for them to burn me alive. Ethan's name appeared finally. Can we not do this in the group chat? It's unnecessary. A soft attempt at peace, a half step toward shielding me. I knew him, his tone was probably cautious, his fingers hesitant, pausing over each word before hitting send. But as always, his effort landed in a void. Olivia responded instantly. Relax, Ethan. It's called banter. If Grace can't take a joke, maybe she should stay home. Another sticker followed, this one of a trophy, sparkling with sarcasm. Margaret added a thumbs up. The speed of it all made me dizzy, like watching sharks circle. Robert's name stayed gray. No reply, no acknowledgement. Just silence, the same silence that had filled every corner of my childhood. His absence in words spoke louder than anything. He would never defend me. I set the phone down, my chest tight. They won't stop, I murmured, mostly to myself. Daniel, seated across from me, didn't look up. His laptop screen glowed against his face, his eyes narrowed, fingers moving quickly. They want you rattled, he said calmly. They want you smaller than them. He scrolled, clicked, scanned. I rubbed my temples. It's working. His jaw flexed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he shifted the laptop slightly, so the glow dimmed from my view. I caught glimpses, restaurant websites, property pages, reviews of Bella Mars, even articles about its ownership. My heart stuttered. He was digging, searching for something in silence, like a man following a thread only he could see. Another ping made me flinch. Olivia again. At least I have something to be proud of. You'll always be the shadow. The words burned hotter than the rest. I swallowed hard, my fingers curling against the table. A shadow. That was all they saw me as, all they wanted me to remain. I glanced at Daniel. His expression hardened, a sharp line settling into his features. Without a word, he reached forward and closed the laptop with a decisive snap. The sound cracked through the kitchen, final and commanding. His eyes found mine, steady, resolute. I need to meet someone this afternoon, he said. The glass of water in my hand trembled. For the first time since the messages started, I let myself look at him with something other than despair. There was a weight in his tone I hadn't heard before, one that promised movement, action, a plan brewing in silence. The phone buzzed again, another cruel line waiting for me to read. But I didn't look. My gaze stayed fixed on Daniel, and for the briefest moment, the daggers in my chest dulled. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and ink. Harold, the owner of Bella Mars, looked at Daniel warily. Are you sure you want to buy this place? Afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, falling across shelves stacked with thick binders and framed certificates. The air carried a weight of decisions made here, contracts signed, futures sealed, and Daniel felt it pressing against his ribs. He adjusted his cuffs, leaning forward with the confidence of a man who knew hesitation could kill opportunity. Yes, Daniel said, voice even, steady. I wouldn't be sitting here otherwise. Harold shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The older man had the look of someone who had seen better days. His once proud restaurant was slipping from his grip, and the wear of it etched deep lines into his face. He tapped the armrest nervously. Bella Mars has been in my family for 30 years. It's not just a business, it's blood, sweat, memory. And now? The market's cruel. Running a place like that, it's not for the faint-hearted. Daniel let Harold's words hang in the air, then leaned in. Which is exactly why you're tired. You've carried it long enough. Let me take it from here. It won't disappear, it'll grow. Under my care, Bella Mars won't just survive, it'll thrive. The lawyer, seated at the polished desk between them, cleared his throat. Papers lay ready, the preliminary contract waiting for ink. Mr. Carter, he said carefully, the terms we discussed are aggressive. Your offer is well above market rate, but it locks you into a significant financial commitment. Are you absolutely certain? Daniel didn't blink. I am. Harold's eyes narrowed, studying him. You've got personal stakes in this, don't you? Nobody throws money like that unless it's personal. Daniel smiled faintly, though his jaw was tense. Let's just say, I believe in the potential. He wasn't going to reveal the real reason, not now. Not to them. Grace's humiliation, her pain replayed over and over in his mind, was the fire fueling this deal. He wanted to rewrite the story of Bella Mars, to take it from a place of ridicule and turn it into the ground where Grace would rise. Harold drummed his fingers on the chair. His reluctance showed in every motion, the hesitation in his breath, the way his eyes darted to the contract, then away, as though signing would be surrendering more than just a business. "And what about her?" he asked suddenly. "The woman who comes there with you. Grace. She doesn't know, does she?" Daniel's chest tightened. He shook his head slowly. "Not yet." "Then you're taking a risk," Harold said. "People don't always appreciate secrets." Daniel's voice was firm. "Some secrets protect more than they hurt. She'll know when it matters." Silence filled the room, heavy and tense. The lawyer slid the pen forward, its weight gleaming under the light. Harold stared at it, his lips pressed tight, then finally exhaled a long, weary breath. He reached for the pen. The scratch of ink across paper was decisive, almost violent. Harold's signature curved across the preliminary documents, the line drawn like the end of an era. The lawyer nodded, gathering the papers quickly, stamping them with an audible thud. Daniel let out the breath he had been holding. "Thank you," he said, rising, extending a hand. Harold hesitated again, then shook it, his grip firm but resigned. "You'd better take care of it," Harold muttered. "Bella Mars deserves more than to be a pawn in some game." Daniel's expression hardened. "It's not a pawn. It's the stage for something greater." He left the office with his coat over his arm, the city's hum rising around him. The sky was tinged orange with the dying day, the streets alive with the rush of people who had no idea that something monumental had just shifted. He pulled his phone from his pocket, the decision already solid in his chest. Scrolling through his contacts, he found the name and pressed call. It rang once before a voice answered. "Daniel? What's going on?" Daniel's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "Carlos, when the time comes, I'll need you with me." And without waiting for a reply, he ended the call, the weight of the signed contract burning like a secret victory in his pocket. The kitchen air was thick with garlic and rosemary. Carlos turned as Daniel walked in. "So it's true? Bella Mars is changing hands?" The stainless steel counters gleamed under the dim evening lights, wiped clean, but still carrying the scent of a day's labor. Pots were stacked neatly, knives aligned in their wooden block. Outside the dining hall, chairs were already upended onto tables, the laughter of customers long faded into the night. Bella Mars had been closed for hours, yet the place pulsed with a quiet, restless energy, as if it knew its fate was being reshaped. Daniel set his jacket on a stool and moved deeper into the kitchen. "Yes," he said, his voice low but certain. "The papers are signed. It isn't final yet, but it will be soon." Carlos, the head chef, ran a hand down his apron, shaking his head. His face was rugged, worn by years in hot kitchens, yet his eyes carried a warmth that had never dimmed. "I've given my life to this place. Harold was good to me, but lately, it's like he stopped fighting, let it all decay. And now you think you can turn it around?" Daniel leaned against the counter, the scent of rosemary catching in his throat. "I don't just think it. I know it. But not alone. That's why I came to you." Carlos raised an eyebrow. "To me? Why? You're the one with the money, the papers, the control." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Number control is useless without vision. And vision?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Vision is what Grace has." At the mention of her name, Carlos's expression softened. He reached for a cutting board, his hands busy though the day's cooking was over. "Grace, she comes here sometimes. Not often, but when she does, I notice things. The way she touches the plates, arranges the garnishes as if they're more than food. She sees art in it, passion, like she wants the world to stop and look." Daniel felt a pang in his chest. He thought of the way Grace had sat in their apartment, glass of water trembling in her hand, haunted by her mother's ridicule. She had spoken of her abandoned dream with shame, as though it were a crime to desire more. Yet Carlos's words confirmed what Daniel already knew. Her dream had not died, it was waiting, simmering beneath the surface, desperate for breath. "She gave up on that dream, because people told her it wasn't worth anything," Daniel said softly. "Her mother, her sister, they made her believe she was foolish. But Bella Mars, it can be hers, a stage for her, not a weapon against her." Carlos studied him in silence, the kitchen's low hum filling the gap. "You love her that much?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "More than I've ever loved anything. But this isn't just about love. It's about justice. About giving her the ground to stand on so when they try to push her down again, she'll rise higher than they can imagine." The chef let the words linger. He walked to the stove, lit a single burner, and placed a pan on it, tossing in a sprig of rosemary. The fragrance bloomed, sharper, deeper, filling the room like memory itself. Justice, Carlos repeated quietly. I've seen her face when her family comes here. The way she hides behind her smile. She doesn't deserve that. Daniel stepped closer. Then stand with me. When the time comes, I'll need people I can trust. People who won't betray the secret before it's ready. Carlos turned off the flame and faced him. His hand, still calloused and warm from decades of cooking, reached out. Their eyes locked. For her, he said with a steady voice, I'll do anything. Daniel clasped his hand. The shake firm. A pact sealed without ink or witness. A pact stronger than any contract Harold had signed. The kitchen grew still again, the moment heavy with unspoken promise. Daniel released Carlos's hand, his mind already racing through steps, timelines, contingencies. But before he could speak again, a faint creak broke the silence. Both men turned. There, standing in the doorway, was Grace. The dim hall light behind her framed her silhouette, her eyes wide, her hand gripping the doorframe. The air shifted, the rosemary scent clashing with the sharp tension that cut through the room. She opened her mouth as though to speak, then stopped, lips pressed tight. Neither Daniel nor Carlos could tell how long she had been standing there nor how much she had heard. Daniel held my hand in the dark, his voice low. Grace, trust me. Everything will change soon. The rain ticked against the glass like fingertips impatiently drumming on a table, each droplet a reminder that the night refused to give her peace. The apartment smelled faintly of damp wool and chamomile, a half-finished cup of tea cooling on the coffee table. Shadows stretched across the walls, broken only by the intermittent flash of passing headlights below. Grace turned her head on the pillow, studying Daniel's face in the darkness. He spoke with conviction, his eyes steady even in the flickering light from the window. But her heart wouldn't let her rest. His meetings, the hushed phone calls, the late returns, it all pressed on her like invisible weights. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. Yet echoes of her mother's voice filled the silence. You'll never be successful. Stop dreaming. Her fingers tightened slightly around his. Daniel, she whispered, the sound barely more than the rain itself. I need to know what's happening. I'm not a child you can soothe with promises. He sighed, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. I'm not treating you like a child. I'm protecting you. Sometimes not knowing is safer. The words pricked her chest. She pulled her hand free and sat up, the sheet slipping off her shoulders. Safer from what? From me? From the truth? Do you know what it feels like to be constantly left in the dark? Her voice quavered, and she bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. Daniel pushed himself upright, leaning back against the headboard. His hair was damp from the rain, his shirt clinging faintly to him. Grace, he said, calm but firm, you'll understand soon. I can't tell you yet, but I swear this isn't about lying to you. It's about timing. Trust me, a little longer. The plea in his tone unsettled her more than any secret. She wanted to hurl accusations, to demand the whole truth, but the way his eyes held hers stilled her tongue. For a moment, she saw the same boy who had once pulled her out of her loneliness with nothing but kindness, who had believed in her when no one else did. But now, belief wasn't enough. Her chest ached with the war inside her. Suspicion, fear, and love, pulling in opposite directions, she whispered. And what if you're wrong? What if all these secrets just make me another fool in my mother's eyes? Daniel reached for her hand again, his grip steady. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, his words sharp and certain. After next Sunday, you'll never bow your head again. The promise shot through her like fire. It was bold, almost reckless, and yet something in his tone made her believe he wasn't simply dreaming. He knew. But what did he know? What was he hiding? The room sank into silence except for the relentless rhythm of the rain. Grace pulled the blanket tighter, staring at the ceiling, her mind caught between hope and dread. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing thoughts, when her phone lit up on the nightstand. The glow cut through the shadows, illuminating Daniel's profile as he watched her. The notification buzzed, insistent. Grace reached for it, the screen stinging her eyes in the darkness. It was a message from Olivia. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. Olivia swirled her wine, lips curling. Grace, stop embarrassing yourself. You'll never match up to me or to Mom's expectations. The cafe gleamed with polished marble counters and walls lined with abstract art. every detail designed to whisper prestige. A chandelier sparkled above, throwing fractured light across Olivia's manicured nails as she raised her glass, savoring her own performance. Grace sat across from her, the soft hum of conversations around them only heightening the sting of her sister's words. Grace traced the rim of her cup, willing her expression to remain neutral. She had known Olivia's invitation carried a hidden edge her sister never met without reason. Still, the casual cruelty cut deep. "Why did you ask me here, Olivia?" Grace asked quietly, her voice, even though her pulse raced. Olivia leaned forward, feigning sympathy. "Because I care about you, Grace. You're my sister. But you have to stop living in delusions. It's painful to watch you stumble from one failure to another. Mom's right. You need direction." She tilted her head, eyes sparkling with amusement more than compassion. Grace swallowed back the retort burning on her tongue. She'd learned long ago that anger only fed Olivia's satisfaction. "Direction?" she repeated. "Or control?" Her sister's smile widened, almost predatory. "Semantics. Call it what you like. But Mom already has something planned for you next Sunday. Consider this a courtesy she wants to make a point you won't forget." The cafe's warmth suddenly felt suffocating. Grace's fingers tightened around her cup, knuckles whitening as she fought to keep her composure. "A point," she echoed, her voice low. Olivia's earrings caught the light as she leaned back, satisfied with the effect of her words. "Yes, you know how she is. She thinks you need discipline, structure. Honestly, Grace, you make it too easy for her." The jab landed with precision, and Grace could almost hear the echo of Margaret's voice layered behind Olivia's. For years, the two of them had been an unbreakable wall. Mother and daughter, united in their judgment, feeding off each other's contempt. Ethan had tried to shield her once, Robert had looked away, but Olivia had always been Margaret's sharpest blade. Grace forced herself to sip her coffee, ignoring the bitter taste. Inside, anger coiled tight, hotter than she expected. The humiliation at Bellamar's still burned in her chest, but now the promise of it repeating again twisted into something else resolve. "Why tell me this?" Grace asked, setting her cup down carefully, deliberately, as though her control might shatter if she wasn't precise. Olivia's smirk widened. "Because I like seeing how you'll react. It's entertaining. You're predictable, Grace. You cry, you sulk, you complain about fairness, and then you repeat the cycle. You'll always be the family's shadow, Grace." The words fell like ice water, sharp and chilling. For a moment, Grace's chest constricted, the old ache of invisibility threatening to swallow her whole. She had always been the afterthought, the failure measured against Olivia's carefully curated success. But not anymore. Not after everything she'd endured. Not after Daniel's whispered promise in the dark. Grace met Olivia's eyes, holding her gaze without flinching. Her voice never left her lips, but inside her thoughts surged with steel, carrying a weight she had never allowed herself before. "If they want war, I'll be ready." "Welcome, Miss Grace." Carlos froze mid-sentence, eyes wide, as if he'd said too much. The words hung in the air, heavier than the scent of rosemary and baked bread drifting through the empty kitchen. Grace stood at the threshold, clutching her bag against her hip. The clatter of pans from the back echoed faintly, but here, in the main prep area of Bellamar's, the silence seemed almost deliberate. Grace had come here with trembling resolve. Every corner of the restaurant carried the weight of her humiliation from that Sunday lunch. The polished marble floors, the flicker of wine glasses, the chatter of patrons, it all haunted her memory. But the kitchen, she reasoned, might feel different. Here was where life began for every dish, where flavors took form. Maybe she could reclaim a piece of herself by stepping into this space, by confronting the ghost directly. Yet Carlos's slip pierced through her fragile courage. She blinked. "Miss Grace?" she repeated, her tone cautious. Carlos shifted, his dark eyes darting to the cutting board as if the herbs scattered there could rescue him. "Slip of the tongue," he muttered, fumbling for a knife. "Old habits, you know." "Old habits?" she pressed, taking a tentative step closer. "What habit is that?" He shook his head quickly, slicing basil with deliberate force. The blade hit the board in rhythmic strikes, too sharp, too fast. His silence filled the room louder than words. Grace's gaze swept the counter. That was when she noticed it, a manila folder resting half-buried beneath a stack of menus. Bold letters across the top caught her eye. "Transfer of ownership, pending." Her breath caught. She moved toward it, her pulse thudding in her ears. "Carlos," she whispered, her fingers brushing the edge of the folder. "What is this?" He stilled. For a heartbeat, he looked at her with something between pity and alarm, then his gaze flickered back to the stove. It's nothing. You shouldn't be here. She ignored him and tugged the folder free. The paper felt heavy, dangerous. Her hands trembled as she flipped it open. Inside, a bold insignia leapt out at her Daniel's company logo, stamped at the top of the document. Her stomach lurched as she scanned further. The lines blurred, but one detail carved itself into her mind. Her own name, faint yet unmistakable, typed beneath a section marked, New Design Consultant. The room seemed to tilt. She stumbled back against the counter, clutching the folder to her chest. "Why is my name on this?" she demanded, voice breaking. "Carlos, what's going on?" He wiped his hands on his apron, avoiding her eyes. "Grace, please. I can't, this isn't mine to tell," asked Daniel. "Daniel?" Her throat tightened. Anger and fear twined together, choking her. "He's behind this?" Carlos's silence was an answer all its own. He turned back to the stove, shoulders stiff, as though retreating into the safety of his pans and knives. Grace's vision blurred, not from tears, but from the flood of questions rushing her mind. What deal had Daniel made? Why was her name hidden in documents she was never meant to see? The hope she had felt in his voice, the comfort in his promises, it now twisted into something else, something darker. Her hand shook as she pulled out her phone. She pressed Daniel's number with frantic urgency. The line rang once, twice. "Pick up," she whispered, pacing the narrow kitchen. "Pick up, Daniel. What have you done?" The call went unanswered. Her voice cracked as she repeated it, louder, angrier, desperate. "What have you done?" But the line stayed silent. Sleep refused to come. Every word from Mom, every smirk from Olivia, circled in my head like vultures. I lay staring at the ceiling of our apartment, the city lights bleeding through the blinds in fractured strips. The hum of the radiator felt too loud, the rhythm of my own heartbeat impossible to quiet. My mind replayed each sneer, each dismissal, until it became a cruel chorus I could not silence. Margaret's cutting voice, Olivia's mocking laugh, the suffocating silence of my father. They lived inside me now, taunting me in the dark. The sheets tangled around my legs as I turned again. Daniel lay beside me, his breathing steady, but I could feel the tension in him, coiled and sharp, even in supposed sleep. I sat up, unable to hold the weight any longer. "Daniel," I whispered. "Wake up." His eyes opened immediately, as if he hadn't really been asleep at all. He propped himself on one elbow, studying my face in the dim light. "Grace? What's wrong?" I pressed my palms into my lap, nails biting crescents into my skin. "Stop pretending nothing's happening. I went to Bella Mars. I saw Carlos. I saw the papers. My name was there, Daniel. My name. Why? What are you doing?" For a long moment he said nothing. The silence thickened until it was nearly unbearable, until I wanted to scream just to shatter it. But then he reached under the nightstand and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it in my hands without a word. My breath caught. I fumbled with the lid, my fingers clumsy in their desperation. Inside, cushioned in satin, lay a single brass key. Its surface glinted in the faint glow, and etched into the head were two words, Bella Mars. I stared at it, my mind refusing to connect the pieces. "What is this?" Daniel leaned closer, his voice low, steady, charged with something I couldn't yet name. "It's yours, Grace. Tomorrow, everything will make sense." I shook my head, trembling, the key heavy and foreign in my palm. "Mine? I don't understand. Why would my name be on those papers? Why didn't you tell me?" He cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing away the tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Because I wanted to show you, not just tell you. I wanted you to feel what it means to stand tall in the very place they tried to break you." The key pressed into my skin, cool and unyielding. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to reject whatever secret plan he'd spun in the shadows. But another part, a part long buried under shame and ridicule, ached to believe him. To believe I could step into Bella Mars not as a victim, but as someone who belonged there. My chest rose and fell in uneven waves as I clutched the key. Fear gnawed at me, whispering that this was reckless, dangerous. Hope tugged the other way, whispering that maybe, just maybe, Daniel was right. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, its vibration cutting through the fragile silence. My hand shook as I picked it up. The screen lit with a message, the sender's name burning like fire. "Margaret, don't be late. Everyone will be waiting." The words blurred, sharp and final, as if they had been carved into stone. My pulse pounded so loudly I could barely breathe. Tomorrow was coming, and with it, the storm I could no longer outrun. The smell of roasted garlic filled the air as I sat at the same table, the same stage where I'd been torn apart a week ago. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of families enjoying their Sunday meals, the faint notes of a violin playing somewhere near the bar, all of it felt suffocatingly familiar. My stomach knotted as my fingers slipped into my pocket, brushing against the key Daniel had given me the night before. Its weight was a reminder, a secret shield. I tried to steady my breath, to remember that I wasn't the same woman who had left here humiliated 7 days earlier. But the walls themselves seemed to remember, echoing with the ghosts of Margaret's laughter and Olivia's cruel smirks. Margaret sat across from me, elegant as ever in a deep burgundy dress, her pearls catching the light. She looked at me the way one might study a cracked vase, amused, disdainful, with a touch of satisfaction. Olivia slid into her chair beside her, swirling her water with unnecessary flair, her smile already sharp enough to cut. Ethan was quieter than usual, his eyes darting nervously between us, while Robert opened his menu with detached indifference, as though he were dining with strangers. Daniel took his seat next to me, his expression unreadable but calm, as if this were nothing more than an ordinary meal. His hand brushed mine briefly under the table, and I clung to that fleeting contact, trying to draw strength from it. The first round of dishes arrived. Carlos stepped forward, carrying trays with deliberate care. When his eyes met mine, there was a flicker, something warmer, more deferential, a subtle acknowledgement that sent a ripple of unease down my spine. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Olivia's gaze narrowed, and Margaret's lips curled, her suspicion like a knife poised to strike. "Still the same place," Margaret said, her tone light but cutting, as she unfolded her napkin. "How fitting. Bellamar suits you, Grace. Always reaching for things you can't quite grasp." Olivia leaned in, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Yes, Grace. Some people never learn. They keep sitting at the same table, telling the same stories, dreaming the same dreams. Pathetic, really." My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I let my hand rest on the key again, the edges biting into my palm as a reminder not to crumble. Daniel's eyes flicked toward me, steady, encouraging. Ethan cleared his throat softly. "Maybe we should just eat, huh? It's Sunday." Margaret cut him off with a sharp glance. "Silence, Ethan. Don't defend weakness. It runs deep enough already." Robert didn't lift his gaze from the menu, the faintest sigh escaping him. His silence, as always, was its own kind of betrayal. The second course was set down. Carlos moved carefully, placing a plate in front of me with a bow too subtle for anyone outside the family to register. But Margaret saw. Olivia, too. Their eyes burned with confusion and the faintest spark of suspicion. I forced myself to lift my fork. My food tasted like ash, every bite a battle to swallow past the rising tide of dread. I wanted to scream at them all, to demand why cruelty came so easily to the people who were supposed to love me. But Daniel sat unmoved, a quiet mountain beside me. Then Margaret leaned back, crossing her arms. Her voice rose just enough to draw a hush around our table. "Still dreaming at the same table, Grace? Tell me at 40, will you still be pretending you have a future worth showing us?" Her laughter lanced through me, cruel and deliberate. The air thickened, pressing against my lungs. My fingers tightened around the key until my knuckles ached. Daniel moved slowly, deliberately. He reached into his briefcase and drew out a thick, leather-bound folder. He placed it on the white tablecloth with a soft thud that silenced the room more effectively than any retort could have. Margaret's laughter faltered, Olivia's brow furrowed. Ethan sat rigid, wide-eyed. Robert finally looked up, the menu slipping from his hand. Daniel's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. His voice, calm and deliberate, cut through the tension. "It's time we discuss some changes." The sound of the folder hitting the table was louder than the chatter around us. It was the sound of a verdict waiting to be read. Every clink of silverware in the restaurant seemed to fade. Conversations from nearby tables, laughter, the faint hum of the violin all dulled into silence as my eyes fixed on the leather-bound folder in front of me. My pulse hammered in my ears, my breath shallow. The room hadn't changed, but something fundamental in the air had shifted. Bellamar's was no longer just a stage for my humiliation. Something else was unfolding, and Daniel sat there like a man in absolute control. Margaret leaned forward first, her pearl necklace catching the light as her eyes narrowed. She gave a small laugh, sharp and brittle. "What's this, Daniel? Another one of your little gestures? You've always had a flair for the dramatic." She sipped her wine, the rim of her glass trembling ever so slightly. Daniel didn't flinch. Calm, measured, he opened the folder with precise fingers, spreading the pages neatly across the table. The faint scrape of paper echoed like thunder in my chest. Contracts. Dozens of them, neatly clipped and stamped. My gaze darted over legal jargon, official seals, ink signatures. The language was stark, undeniable. Margaret's laugh grew louder, forced, like glass cracking under pressure. Paper tricks. That's all this is. He's just showing off to distract us. A stack of documents doesn't mean anything. Olivia smirked, her eyes glinting with mockery. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. So this is your big act, Daniel? You think you can buy respect with some signatures? Pathetic. Even money can't buy dignity for someone like Grace. She tilted her head toward me, her words dripping like poison. Did you know about this? Did you really agree to let him parade around like this, pretending he's clever? My lips parted, but no words came out. My hand trembled in my lap, clutching at my dress. My heart screamed that something larger was happening, something I hadn't been told. And yet, Daniel's expression never faltered. He slid one of the pages across the table, his hand steady, his eyes locked on Margaret's. This isn't pretense. Bella Mars has been transferred. Ownership rights, deeds, contracts of sale. His voice carried low but firm, every word deliberate. You can laugh at me if you wish, but you won't laugh at her anymore. For a moment, Margaret's lips twitched, but she leaned back, scoffing as if dismissing a child's lie. You expect us to believe this nonsense? That you, of all people, managed to get your hands on Bella Mars? Daniel didn't answer her. Instead, he turned the next page, spun it gently, and slid it toward me. His eyes found mine steady, unwavering, filled with something fierce but tender. Look, my throat tightened. The black ink across the page blurred as my eyes scanned the lines, the letters weaving together into meaning that almost knocked the breath from me. There at the bottom, next to Daniel's bold signature, was mine. My name, written in unmistakable cursive, sealed into permanence. I recoiled slightly, as if the page had burned me. What is this? My voice cracked, shaking under the weight of disbelief. Daniel leaned closer, his words barely above a whisper. It's not just mine, Grace. It's yours. I wanted you to have a stage no one could take away again. Ethan's fork clattered to the plate, his wide eyes darting between the page and me. Robert's face, usually so detached, twitched with the faintest flicker of recognition, maybe even unease. Carlos stood frozen a few steps away, the tray in his hands trembling as though he too felt the seismic shift. Margaret's laugh rang out again, shriller this time, edged with desperation. Forgery. Lies. He's playing games with you, Grace. He'll make you look like a fool. Olivia leaned in, venom sharpening her tone. Can you really be so gullible? He's humiliating you in front of all of us. Don't you see? You'll always be the shadow, Grace, no matter what signatures are on that paper. But their words barely reached me. My fingers reached out, almost against my will, brushing the edge of the page. I pulled it closer, scanning line after line. Transfer of ownership, partnership agreement, joint stakeholding, co-owner, Grace Whitmore. The room tilted. A rush of heat and cold surged through me all at once. This wasn't a dream, nor a cruel trick. My name appeared again and again, neatly typed, legally binding, impossible to deny. My voice broke the silence, smaller than I intended, but sharp enough to slice through the static. My name. My eyes darted from page to page, my voice growing steadier with each repetition. It's on every page. The table fell silent. Even Margaret's smirk froze, faltering under the weight of the revelation. Olivia's hand slipped from her glass, the faint clink echoing like a gunshot in the quiet. Ethan exhaled shakily, and Robert, for the first time, set his jaw as though he couldn't pretend detachment anymore. Every face turned toward me, but all I could see were those pages, my name in black and white, undeniable, unerasable. My name, it's on every page. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking at the table, I was the one commanding it. The realization washed over me as the midday sunlight poured through Bella Mars' tall windows, splashing across the polished surface of the dining table. Where once the light had exposed my shame, it now lit the contract spread out before me, the ink of my name shimmering like proof etched in stone. I felt my spine lengthen, my shoulders squaring, as though some invisible weight had lifted. The same chair, the same family, The same restaurant, but everything had changed. I drew a slow breath and lifted my chin. I am co-owner of Bella Mars, I said, the words steady, resonant enough to hush the muttering of nearby relatives who had been whispering since Daniel placed the folder down. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Margaret exploded. Her hand slammed against the table with a sharp crack that startled even the servers at the edges of the hall. Glasses trembled, silverware rattled. Her face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. "Lies?" she spat, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You dare stand there and parade this farce in front of me?" Her fury rolled over the table, but I did not bow my head. I watched her the way one studies a storm through a pane of glass, dangerous, yes, but containable. Olivia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, smirk curling her lips. "You're just hiding behind Daniel's money, Grace. A puppet dressed up in someone else's power." Her voice dripped contempt. Every syllable meant to strip me bare. "You could never achieve this on your own. Everyone knows it." Heat flared in my chest, not of shame this time, but of fire. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the brass key that Daniel had given me, and set it gently but firmly on the table. The sound was soft, but it cut through the tension like thunder. The key gleamed in the sunlight, its engraved words clear to everyone present. Bella Mars. "This," I said, letting my gaze travel from Olivia to Margaret, "is mine as much as it is his. I didn't ask for your approval. I don't need it. This restaurant will not be another stage for your cruelty. Not anymore." Ethan's eyes widened. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing from me to Margaret, torn between loyalty and disbelief. Robert, usually so distant, pressed his lips together and leaned back slowly, as if even he could no longer ignore the truth laid bare before him. Margaret's chair scraped loudly as she leaned forward, trembling with fury. "You dare speak to me like that?" Her voice cracked with indignation. "I raised you. I made you. Without me, you would be nothing." I met her glare without flinching. For the first time, her power did not reach me. For the first time, her words felt like smoke instead of fire. "No one insults me in a place I own," I said, each word deliberate, measured, carrying all the weight of years of silence now broken. My voice did not waver, though my heart pounded like a drum inside me. The declaration hung heavy in the air, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. The relatives at the far end of the table shifted uncomfortably, whispers rippling among them. Carlos, standing just within view near the kitchen door, gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement, his eyes shining with something like pride. Margaret's eyes narrowed to slits, her lips curling into a venomous smile. She leaned closer, her voice low but sharp enough to pierce. "You think one restaurant makes you untouchable?" The venom dripped from her words, promising that this was far from over. The sunlight seemed colder now, the air sharper, as though the room itself braced for the storm to come. Her laughter was sharp, but her trembling hands betrayed something else, fear. The sound sliced through the dining hall, brittle and unsteady, like glass about to shatter. Margaret leaned back in her chair, her shoulders pulled taut, lips curling in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. For a moment she looked like the queen she had always pretended to be, commanding and unflinching. But her fingers, restless against the polished wood of the table, tapped with a nervous rhythm she couldn't control. "You think this makes you powerful?" she sneered, her voice pitched high enough to silence the whispers of the relatives watching. "You think signing a few pieces of paper makes you more than a failure?" Her words reached me with the weight of years, echoing the same chorus she'd sung since I was a child. But now, for the first time, they no longer cut. They rang hollow, like a play she'd rehearsed too often. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Do you know why I push you, Grace? Do you even remember what I endured when I was your age? Belittled, dismissed. Nothing came easy. I had to fight for every scrap of respect." Her voice trembled not with tenderness, but with a desperate attempt to twist history into justification. "I made you tough. I made you survive." I felt the old ache in my chest, the part of me that used to ache for her approval. But Daniel's steady gaze from across the table anchored me. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone reminded me that survival meant more than enduring her cruelty, it meant rising above it. Olivia leaned forward, eyes glinting with satisfaction, her voice smooth and cutting. "And yet Grace is still a fraud. She clings to Daniel's charity, pretending it's her own accomplishment. You can dress up a shadow, but it's still only a shadow." The smirk on her face mirrored Margaret's cruelty, a sharpened echo of the woman who had raised her. My sister's words might once have sent me retreating into silence, but now they felt like sparks against stone, igniting something stronger inside me. Margaret seized the moment, slamming her palm against the contracts spread across the table. "Forged!" she spat, her voice shrill with desperation. "These signatures, these stamps, nothing but tricks! Lies meant to humiliate me. My daughter could never hold something real, not on her own. I will not be shamed by her fantasy." The room bristled with tension, the weight of disbelief hanging over every guest. My father stared into his untouched glass, as though hoping silence could erase the chaos. Ethan's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, his eyes darting between Margaret and me with visible unease. Daniel raised his hand, calm, assured, and signaled toward the doorway. The heavy doors creaked open, and in stepped a man in a gray suit, carrying a slim briefcase. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he approached the table, his demeanor unshakable. "This is Mr. Green," Daniel said evenly, "the attorney of record." Margaret's lips parted, a flicker of panic flashing across her face before she masked it with another burst of brittle laughter. "A lawyer? Really? You bring a clown to perform for us?" Mr. Green set the briefcase down, opened it with a click, and withdrew the official contract. His voice carried the weight of authority, calm and measured. "These documents have been signed and notarized according to the law. Bella Mars is, without any question, co-owned by Grace Thompson and Daniel Carter. There is no fraud here." A collective murmur rippled across the room. Olivia's smirk faltered for the first time, her fingers tightening around her wineglass. Ethan leaned back, his breath audible in the sudden silence. Margaret shot to her feet, her face a storm of rage and disbelief. "No, no, I will not accept this," she shrieked, the sound breaking, raw. Her voice lost its polished cruelty and cracked into something almost feral. "You'll never be good enough, do you hear me? Never." The force of her words rang through the hall, but instead of breaking me, they hung in the air like the desperate cries of someone drowning. For the first time, her power collapsed under its own weight. From the corner of the room, Carlos stepped forward. He carried a porcelain plate carefully in his hands, the aroma of garlic and rosemary filling the space as he approached. Every eye followed him as he set the signature dish, the one Bella Mars was known for, directly in front of me. His voice was quiet but firm, carrying more truth than Margaret's screams ever had. "For the owner." The words struck like a bell, clear and undeniable. Forks paused midair, mouths hung open. Every relative stared not at Margaret, not at Olivia, but at me. For the first time, I wasn't the shadow at the table. I was the center. I rose from my chair, the dining hall hushed. For once all eyes were on me and I welcomed it. The scrape of the chair against the floor echoed louder than the chatter of the afternoon crowd. Forks clattered down, conversations paused mid-sentence, and the tension that had built over weeks coiled itself around every guest in Bella Mars. My heart beat hard against my ribs, but it wasn't the frantic thudding of fear anymore. It was steady, rising like a drum roll. I looked down the long table where my family sat. Margaret's eyes gleamed with disdain. Olivia's smirk hovered. Ethan stared wide-eyed. And Robert, as always, retreated into silence. But there was a shift in the air, a weight pressing in on everyone as they waited to see what I would do. "This restaurant," I began, my voice firm, carrying across the marble and wood-paneled walls, "will no longer be a place where I'm torn apart. It will be a place where others are lifted up." Gasps fluttered among the relatives. The words weren't rehearsed, but they had lived inside me for years, waiting to be spoken. "I have plans for Bella Mars. We'll open our doors to local artists. We'll host community events, fundraisers, and create opportunities for people who've been silenced too long." My voice grew steadier with each sentence. "This won't just be a restaurant. It will be a stage one where voices matter." The clinking of glasses and faint hum of curiosity spread from the dining hall to the surrounding tables. A couple nearby leaned in closer, listening. Then another patron set down her fork, murmuring to her companion. Soon the buzz of approval grew until scattered applause broke out among the lunch crowd. I felt my throat tighten not with weakness, but with the rawness of standing in the light after so many years in the shadow. The customers didn't know the history of the humiliation that had played out here. They didn't know my mother's endless scorn or Olivia's sharp-edged mockery, but they heard my vision, and they chose to respond. Margaret's lip curled, her laughter bubbling up again. "Dreams," she spat, her voice slicing through the applause. "Dreams don't feed anyone. People need results, not your pretty fantasies. You think anyone here will still clap when you can't pay the bills?" Daniel leaned forward, his calm breaking through her fury like sunlight through storm clouds. "These weren't my ideas, Margaret," he said. "They were Grace's. I just believed in them. I still do." A hush spread across the table again. Margaret blinked, as though the ground beneath her had tilted. For years she had dismissed me as fragile, as empty, as nothing more than a burden. Now Daniel's words exposed the truth she refused to accept. I wasn't borrowing strength. I had always carried it inside me. I reached into my pocket and placed the small key onto the table, the same key Daniel had given me in the quiet of our apartment. The engraved letters caught the light, glinting like a metal. I met my mother's eyes. "Yesterday, you turned this place into a stage to shame me." My voice carried, no longer trembling, no longer small. "Today it's my stage, and I decide who gets a seat at this table." The silence that followed was thunderous. It wasn't the silence of dismissal or mockery. It was the silence of reckoning. The silence that follows truth when it cuts too deep to be denied. For a moment, I thought Margaret would erupt again, but her mouth snapped shut, her fury burning in the tightness of her jaw. Olivia shifted uncomfortably, her practiced smirk faltering. Ethan exhaled softly, almost like relief. Then, breaking the tension in the most unexpected way, Robert finally lifted his fork. He took a slow bite of fish, chewed thoughtfully, and said, "The fish is good." A ripple of nervous laughter ran down the table, dissipating the suffocating weight. For Robert, it was the closest thing to acknowledgement I had ever received. Perhaps not love, perhaps not admiration, but acknowledgement nonetheless. Margaret's hand shook slightly as she set her glass back down, the faint rattle against the wood carrying farther than she intended. Her eyes locked onto mine, icy but unsteady. "You've won for now," she whispered, her venom muted but not extinguished. The words slid across the table like a final challenge, and though they carried bitterness, I felt no fear. For the first time, I saw it clearly. Her power was crumbling, her reign slipping, and she knew it. She lowered her glass, the faint clink echoing like defeat. The sound stretched through the dining hall, a soft punctuation that marked the end of something far larger than just a lunch. The same clink that once cut me to the bone at this very table now rang hollow, stripped of power. I looked at Margaret, and for the first time, her gaze slipped from mine. The afternoon sun had shifted, pouring long shadows across Bella Mars, painting the marble floor in fading streaks of gold. Conversations from other tables resumed quietly, but here at this table, the silence was suffocating. Plates sat half-eaten, silverware untouched. My family, once so eager to dissect me, suddenly seemed smaller, their voices muted, their authority cracked. Olivia fiddled with her napkin, lips parting as though to strike, but no words came. The sarcasm she had sharpened like a blade for years dulled before it even left her mouth. She finally leaned back, her expression collapsing into a mask of bitterness. Ethan's eyes darted between us, and when they landed on me, there was no mockery, no pity, only regret. He cleared his throat, his voice low, almost embarrassed. "Grace, I was wrong. Wrong to stay quiet all these years. I let them treat you this way because silence was easier." He dropped his gaze. "I should have spoken up." The words struck deeper than I expected. For so long, Ethan had been little more than a ghost in family conflicts, retreating into shadows. Now, even this sliver of confession felt like a fracture in the wall I had fought against for decades. Robert set down his fork, his movements deliberate. His voice trembled, but then steadied. "I failed you too. Pretending detachment was neutrality. It wasn't. It was cowardice." My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. "It was," I said softly, my voice clear in the charged quiet. "But I don't need your silence anymore. I don't need anyone's silence." Margaret's glass trembled in her hand as she muttered, "You've won this round." The words were bitter, meant to cut, but they faltered against the new weight in the room. I leaned forward, steady, my voice even sharper than hers. "Not this round. From now on." The air shifted then, a subtle exhale from the staff who lingered near the edges watching. Carlos appeared with quiet precision, placing fresh water at my side, his expression unreadable but loyal. Behind him, two servers paused, standing straighter, almost in alignment with me as though without words they were taking a side. Margaret noticed. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of the staff's silent deference. For the first time, she realized Bella Mars was no longer her stage. The spotlight had shifted, and she couldn't wrest it back. The meal wound down without another insult, without the familiar sting of mockery. The clatter of cutlery was subdued, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken acknowledgement. My family left food untouched, their appetites spoiled not by the dishes but by defeat. When Margaret finally rose, Olivia followed without a word, her eyes flashing a promise of resentment, but no plan to unleash it, at least not here. Ethan lingered as though searching for courage to say more, but in the end, he simply nodded before trailing after them. Robert gave a long sigh, and though he said nothing more, there was a softness in his expression I had never seen before. As they disappeared toward the door, the shadows seemed to leave with them, pulled out of Bella Mars like storm clouds breaking after the rain. I remained standing, feeling the staff's presence like a steady current at my back. I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like prey. For the first time, I felt like the anchor in the room, the one holding steady while others drifted. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine, filled with pride but also something quieter, an invitation, a reminder that this was just the beginning. I exhaled, long and full, as if releasing years of weight. Turning to him, I let the corner of my lips curve into something between relief and determination. I'm ready to start building more than just a restaurant. The shadows that once silenced her family dissolved, leaving behind the image of a woman who had transformed humiliation into power. Injustice had sharpened her spirit, but it was courage that carved the path toward justice, proving that lies may reign for a season, but truth always claims the final crown. When betrayal is confronted head-on, it becomes the spark that burns away the chains of silence. No wall of deceit can withstand the steady tide of truth. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Comment 1 if you feel the same strength, or 2 if you think the fight is still unfinished.